Welcome to the Worker Co. Podcast, Minnesota edition. The Worker Co. Podcast exists to tell stories of employee ownership, to be a resource, expanding imagination for and access to broad employee ownership. We tell these stories because we believe employee ownership is a powerful tool to lift people out of poverty and create wealth for workers. Jean Sand joined Room and Board in 2008 and currently serves as the Chief Financial Officer. In this role, Jean oversees the finance team, which includes functions related to planning, forecasting, corporate accounting, treasury, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and sales tax. In addition, Jean oversees coordination of the company's legal claims. Prior to her current position, Jean served as Controller, Director of Accounting, and Vice President of Accounting. Jean is a licensed CPA and received her Bachelor of Accounting degree from the College of St. Benedict. Welcome. And next, we have, since 1992, Nancy Greatrix led the Human Resources team for Room and Board, a 100% employee-owned company via an employee stock ownership plan, or ESOP, with annual revenue in excess of $600 million. Room and Board is also proud to be a certified B Corp. Nancy also serves on the board of directors for the company. Nancy is a sought-after speaker at top universities and business forums, sharing expertise and innovative leadership in business strategy and culture-based leadership development, as well as staff member engagement and well-being. Her efforts are laser-focused on preserving Room and Board's core philosophies and business culture while stimulating company growth. Nancy received her MBA from the University of Buffalo. Room and Board transitioned to a fully employee-owned company. Can you tell us a little bit about your history? We'll start with you, the history and what you thought about employee ownership, if it was now, and how you started and where you are now.
Well, thank you first for that introduction. Having been at Room Board for 32 years now, I can honestly say that in our early years, ESOP was never really on the radar. When I joined Room Board, along with several of our key leaders who are still with the company today, we really focused on building the business, understanding how we wanted to make decisions, how we wanted to treat one another, and really focused on creating a customer experience that was second to none in terms of helping our customers furnish the homes they love. It probably wasn't until, I don't know, within the last 10 years, maybe 7 to 10 years, we started to recognize that there would ultimately be a need for a transition into a different ownership structure than what we had, and we were privately held S Corp. And we knew long term we needed a way to transition the company that would sustain Room and Board in the way that we want to see our legacy preserved.
When you started at Room and Board, how big was the company? How many sites did you have? How big was the team?
The best way that I can describe it is my first year at Room Board. I started in September of 92. We wrapped up that year with $11 million in sales. We
Wow.
now do that about each week. Just for perspective, I think we had maybe 100, 125 folks. We now have over 1,100. At the time, we had 3-4 stores. We were in Denver, Chicago, here in Minneapolis, and now we have stores across the country, from east to the west coast.
That is a huge success. And tell us what your focus was on products when you first started. What were you trying to achieve for people?
Well, we were founded in 1980 by John Gabbard, and he grew up with his family in a more traditional home furnishings business, and he left that business to really manage a company in the way that he envisioned. He's very much a visionary and an entrepreneur, and I think the premise of Room and Board was that first and foremost, he wanted to surround himself with people he enjoyed and with whom he wanted to work. He wanted to have a retail environment that was not focused on a sales mentality. He felt that lacked integrity. He wanted to hash things priced fairly and allow customers to make decisions when they're ready, not because something was on or off sale. Respect was important to him. We wanted to create a environment not just for our teams, but for our customers that were founded in respect and doing the right thing. We'll give small way to exemplify that, but we've never paid our sales team commission. We don't want them to be incentivized by encouraging someone to make a decision because it's to their advantage. We want them to help a customer make a decision when they're ready. And I think most importantly, most uniquely, his design aesthetic. He really envisioned a very simple, clean, elegant, contemporary style home furnishings, pieces that can live forever in your home. They're not dated. They're well made. We focus on American craftsmanship, and so this. We focus on American craftsmanship and salt and heirloom pizzas, and he really wanted to sell people furniture that he would live with and that he was proud of. And he certainly really enjoyed building the consortium of American craftsmen and vendors that we work with today to help us do that and to help them prosper as well.
Thank you. Nancy, from your perspective, what makes Room and Board unique?
Well, you mentioned it in the bio. It's our culture. I
Okay.
think we've really developed a unique culture, which every business has, right? Everyone has their own way of working and working together. Um, many years ago, probably going back 30 some years ago when we're all new in the company, we would have conversations often about how we wanted to work with one another, what experiences we wanted to make for our customers, and how we were going to make decisions. And today, those values, those beliefs, those thoughts have been written down and solidified in a document we call Guiding Principles, and it's really founded essentially on respect, making sure that we treat customers, each other, vendors, etc., with respect. It's about individual accountability and trusting that we're all there for a reason and we're expected to take initiative and do the best that we possibly can to have the company succeed. And then very transparent. It's about engaging in the business. And you can't be successful, in our view, unless you understand how your work ties to the broader success of business. And I think the last tenet of our guiding principles is really focused around understanding that we're selling furniture. We're part of something much bigger in terms of the world in which we live, and we have um, an obligation and a passion to help communities where we live and work thrive and do the right thing. So those principles have really created an environment where people tend to stay. I'm not the only one kicking around with 30 some years of tenure. There are a lot of people with 30, 20, 25 years of tenure. And they thrive because they can be themselves. They can be authentic, and they can really be their best self in terms of who they are personally as well as professionally. So it's created a really special place to work.
It's rare. It's rare to be purposeful about culture and think about it. Jean, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to work at Room and Board and what you find unique about your experience.
Yeah. My past prior to Room and Board was really public accounting, working for large public companies. And so, Room and Board came along at what I would call a really perfect time from a career perspective as well as a personal perspective. And so I think I Room and Board was everything that I probably missed in some of those other careers prior to this. What I find really unique from a really financial perspective is obviously Nancy spoke beautifully to the philosophical beliefs, and certainly I support all of those. I feel them and I see them every day. From a financial perspective, I think what I find really unique about Room and Board is probably not unique across the board, but for me, from where I came from, is that we make a lot of decisions not just based on financials. We obviously, financials are always a part of it, right? We are trying to be successful in our business, but at the same time, we consider a lot of different things when we make a decision, right? Because we want to do things that are right for our vendors, our staff members, our customers, and quite frankly, for the communities that we live in. And so I find great value in that. I think in addition to that, something that I'd never seen prior to this is we're really transparent. To Nancy's point, we want people to see the financials. So we don't share financials in a really small circle. We share them broadly because we want people to understand how they impact the business. And I find that really great. And lastly, we have always had a goal to operate a business with little to no debt. And so in my time
Wow.
with room and board, so 16 years, I think we've had debt maybe twice for a very short period of time, but really trying to operate in a way that we can make really good decisions for the business based on the needs of staff members, vendors, and our communities, as well as our customers. And so getting to make those decisions without having a third party have any sort of opinion in that. And so I think those things for me are the things that stand out the most and that I really have a lot of respect for each and every day.
That is also rare, right? It is also
Yes.
rare today. It's hard. It's hard to start a business, to run a business, to keep it, and it's hard not to carry debt when you're trying to grow or change. So that is unique. Okay, I'd like you to share from both perspectives, sort of when maybe you started thinking about that. What are we going to do next? We want to maybe how is someone going to exit this business, and what is it going to look like afterwards for us at Room and Board?
I would tell you Nancy's been on the journey a little bit longer than I have, but I mean, I think this has been something we've been talking about and thinking about maybe for the last 8 to 10 years. And it wasn't necessarily like, how do we need to exit the business? It was really about this great responsibility that we knew as leaders that we had to the current and future generations of staff members, right? We owed it to the staff members to make sure that we had a plan in place for the future ownership of the company, allowing them to keep all those things that Nancy described in place. So, how do we continue to operate the business the way that we want to operate a business, holding true to those guiding principles? And so, we've been looking into it for a long time, and we have looked at absolutely everything, right? When you think about private equity, not for profit ownership, going public, right? We've looked at a lot of great things. And really, ESOP is where we landed eventually, but it was really out of a great responsibility to our staff members in the company as opposed to needing to really change the ownership right now.
It also sounds like you sometimes when people transition or explore employee ownership, they have a very top-down model. They do not share information really with staff. So it sounds to me like you already had that environment of ownership to a certain extent and transparency. Do you feel like that made a difference when you chose and you explored other options when you chose the ESOP model? And how was that experience once you said, okay, this is what we think, we're going to become an ESOP? What was that experience like doing that transition for yourself, do you think, and your employees?
So, the fact that we were well situated to be an ESOP is very true. As Gene and I and others went through the actual transaction process of becoming ESOP, we worked with several different professionals through that process: attorneys, investment folks, and other advisors, a trustee, etc. And more than once, and almost from every advisor with whom we spoke, they just kept remarking how we were built to be an ESOP. And it's those principles that I talked about that you referenced. It's the fact that we're transparent, that we involve people in the business, that we have tenure, we have people committed to the work that they do. And that we took an engagement survey earlier this year, and the most highly rated question was that people said that they knew how their work affected the success of the business. And tied with that question was also the sentiment that everyone believed that we would continue to be successful in the future. And I can't even imagine a better springboard to begin the ESOP, other than already having the ethos baked into all levels of our organization. So it really, as we pursue the ESOP, along with the other, cadre of solutions that you mentioned, the further we got down the path, the more we said, you know what, this really does make sense. And it meets those objectives of ensuring the future and future generations of our employees and the vendors who rely on our business and et cetera. So it fit like a glove. It fit like a glove.
That you do not hear that very often. Most owners that explore employee ownership look at least two models, and it's very interesting that you knew, but you had already created that culture over the decades of a culture ship of ownership and of people staying in low turnover, which also makes for successful companies. From the financial standpoint, Jean, what do you think those first explorations, because it's not without cost, right, to transact? What were some of the, if you had some pain points, or what were some maybe made you go, oh, is this right for us? And then how did you finally go, this is right for us?
And maybe I can step back because as we looked at all those things, we had really 4 criteria. And I'm going to read them so that I don't get them wrong. But we wanted to preserve our culture and continue to engage and reward our staff members. We wanted to stay true to our business values and guiding principles. What allows us to be in control of our future and make decisions that are in the best interests of our staff members, vendors, and customers, and remain profitable through organic growth. So those were the 4 criteria that in every situation that we looked at, we said, can we meet those objectives? And ESOP was one of the only ones that checked it. So from a financial perspective, yes, there was a lot of financial things that we had to think about, right? For a company that didn't have debt on our books, we financed it through seller financing. So now there was going to be debt on the books. And so it was a pivot. But again, if you can go back to those 4 things I just described, we were really clear that the ESOP would allow all 4 of those things. And so the financial, why not secondary? It's a big deal. I think once you can get to the point where you say, I know what I'm doing from a criteria perspective, the financials are just something you really just need to understand and help pave the way as we continue through the ESOP.
And how long was your process timeline from when you said, okay, right? Because it doesn't happen overnight. It's not like private equity that if you choose private equity, they can come in, you can be done soon and get a very end. For an ESOP, you had to take a fair market value.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So again, we were owned by a small group of shareholders prior to this, right? So there were 27 shareholders, 19 of those were staff members, and the remaining members were family. And so evaluation wasn't all that different for us. We understood it. We've been doing it for years. But obviously, an ESOP was a big deal. So I think from the time that we really made the decision and shared high level with the staff that we were exploring, this was probably mid-fall,
Mm-hmm.
call it October, November, and we closed on the transaction in mid-April. So it was a pretty, obviously we had a lot of great trusted advisors through the whole thing. We had terrific people that helped support us, people that had a long history with us, so they understood who we were. So as we were making decisions, they knew what were the things that we could get on board with, which are the things that we had to tweak a little bit. So I think between great advisors and the fact that we felt really good about the path, we were able to do it relatively quickly.
That is lightning quick.
Yeah.
Lightning quick.
I smiled when you said not overnight, and I was thinking, yeah, kind of overnight.
It was kind of overnight for you.
And in this time frame before we really got laser focused on the path of the ESOP, we had looked at ESOP casually a few times in the past, 8 to 10 years, as Jean said, along with the other things that we knew might be possibilities. So we had a familiarity with just the basics, nowhere near the detail that we were exposed to in the process. But we had already kind of had that on the list and kept setting aside just to make sure that we talked about any possible alternative to make sure that we could make the best possible decision, again, for the long term.
And because it was such a quick turnaround, oftentimes businesses that become employee owned, there is quite a lot of education for employees to bring people along, right? Financial Readiness, people who have never maybe had enough to make a budget or think about how do I invest in something. How did you bring your employees along on such a quick turnaround?
Well, I can let Gina does a lot of the education, which we've just started to do, but Jean mentioned something that I think is somewhat unique. At least we're told that it was different in the process of that when we knew we wanted to pursue this, we didn't know for sure it would happen, but we really wanted to get serious with this as a transition. We sent a message to all of our teams and said, "Hey, we're pursuing ESOP for these reasons and the criteria that Jean just read to you. Um, and we don't know if it's going to happen. But again, in full transparency, we knew that we were going to be asking people for information that we've never inquired about before. We knew we would have people in our office environment that would be strangers, and we wanted to be authentic. We wanted to be transparent, and so it was probably early on, probably on end of October, November, where we sent that communication out. And again, with a good dose of we don't know, we just want to share what we know. And I think what that did is it gave us a little bit of a head start, and not necessarily on the detail of being an employee shareholder and our financials and et cetera, although people have always been exposed to those. But it just gave people a little bit of time to get their brain around the idea and maybe do a little bit of their own digging or research to understand it. So when we were able to communicate that, yep, we've done the deal, we're an ESOP, it was very joyful, and it didn't cause consternation because it's the first they'd ever heard of it. What's this and what does this mean? So I think we wouldn't have done it any other way. And we did it initially just to be transparent and honest. But I think kind of planting that seed early on was helpful in helping our staff members to really kind of follow along with us.
Were they excited?
Oh, sure. So we all were. It was a pretty joyful occasion. But Jean can speak to the education. We went through a pretty thoughtful process of just laying the basic foundation, so folks knew what was going to happen, in future.
Jean, please share with us.
Yeah, so we went through, obviously we closed in April, and by May, June timeframe, we had already created high-level education with the help of attorneys, the trustee, right? Again, all these great partners that we worked with had helped us create. And so we had a number of in-person here in Minnesota for training, and then we were able to video it and share it out across the country, and then following up with Q&A sessions, so having people absorb it, come back for questions. And then we've really consistently had a space on our internal website that allows for people to ask questions whenever they feel the need to do so. We also have a financial advisor that we work with and that we allow our staff members to use for their personal financial goals. And so, really bringing them in the loop and allowing them to have staff members reach out to them and ask questions, them be able to be educated and understand and help each staff member understand what this might mean for them personally. And that's just the beginning, right? So as we near this first year end with the ESOP and as we run through the first real valuation, all the work working with again with all these partners, there'll be additional every kind of stage where you have a moment to interface with our staff members. We'll try to create education and make sure. And then obviously at some point it will become just part of what we do. But these first few years, I think we're going to want to catch them every time, right? Now we know the stock value. Now it's in your accounts. Here's what that's going to look like. So I think just continuing to reiterate those things will be really important.
Now, one thing I find lovely that has been shared with me is transitioning to employee ownership as an ESOP. That is a qualified retirement plan. So for people, I'm 60, so for workers that are 60 becoming employee owned, I might not see all those benefits, and yet you made the decision to transact to employee ownership for what comes after you. What was that thought process about that? That is not typical.
I will tell you that that probably was one of the pain points of the decision-making process because we have a lot of people who are, in their 60s, they've worked here many years, and you're correct, they will not fully be able to benefit from the ESOP because it is a retirement vehicle and it's something that counts for each individual. Go grow slowly over time, especially now with the debt on the business. The value of the business will reflect that, and so our share price will also grow as we continue to be successful as a company and pay down that debt. We were very deliberate in the process of defining the plan design. And most ESOPs typically rely on a point system, and staff members are awarded points based on their compensation, and then the points you have are then the shares you receive are then derived from those points. And we certainly had a formula like that with respect to compensation, but we also had a system where people's tenure prior to the ESOP would award them points. So we could just this one-time allocation. So if they get 5 extra points for their tenure, they will have those 5 points added to their point balance every year thereafter. And it was a way to just kind of accelerate their share growth. And again, if someone leaves us in 2, 3 years, that's not going to be significant. But it was a way that we could make a gesture to those tenured staff members and acknowledge they helped build us to the point that we could become an ESOP. And so we wanted to make sure that we could reflect that. We've not mentioned this yet, but we've been paying profit sharing since 2016, Jean.
Yes.
And so those individuals have at least had the opportunity to benefit from that. Although that's just a payment, it's not, and they can choose to put it in the 401(k). It's not a retirement payment per se, but they have had that opportunity to do so. I don't know if you want to add to that, G, but that was a tough part in the decision because we knew that we were not going to be able to fully reward to the ESOP those tenured folks.
If you had a graph of over that time frame that we were working through the ESOP of what we spent our time on, I do believe that the biggest piece would have been around points allocation and thinking about those staff members that were nearing retirement. Because it did just cause a lot of, your heart went out to it, but obviously you have to start somewhere. So I would tell you we spent the most amount of time modeling it, trying to figure out what this might look for someone. Because again, you want to be grateful for the people that have helped build the business, and you want to appreciate the people that have come into the business, right? So there's this fine balance of really thinking about that. And so I think, like I said, if you had to figure out how much, I think our greatest time spent was really thinking about how this was going to look like for the staff member, whether they just came to room and board or they've been with us for 30 years, whether they're 30 years to retirement or they're going to retire in 4 years. So all those things were really high, high on our list of things we really wanted to make sure and understand.
What would you tell someone about how transformational employee ownership could be as an ESOP?
I think what I would tell them is that you really, I think that having staff members take part in the business is so amazing. And again, we'd already built a base of this, but I think this idea that each and every one of us contributes and is rewarded based on the work that we do every day, it's just an amazing feeling, right? Having people come to work and knowing that they're a part of something bigger and that they'll be rewarded based on that bigger thing, it's so amazing. And I think that it's an opportunity to have everyone come in and act like it's their own, as opposed to just showing up for a job, right? I think that's really the difference. And again, we had a lot of that before, but I would tell you, even in the conversations you hear and the way that people act and the questions that they ask, it's different than it was. And I think it's only going to get better.
Completely agree with that. And almost to illustrate how that becomes to the advantage of the organization. Um, as we do every time this year, we just went through a benefit renewal for our healthcare insurance, and as many companies have experienced this cycle, our increase in premiums that we need to pay was much higher than we typically see. Thankfully, we were able to negotiate the initial renewal rate down a bit, but even ended up with a percentage that wasn't necessarily what we would desire. And it was so um, important to be able to say, we were more transparent than ever before. Here's a renewal process. Here's how we start with one number, we get down to another number. And then we sort of rethought how we distributed the cost sharing on the premiums because we had to be concerned with how burdensome we'd be to our individual staff members, but we also had to care about the expense burden on the company. And it was really enlightening to just take our time and walk through the process and say, as employer owners, we are very cognizant of each of us as individuals and what this means for us personally, but we also have to be equally aware of the health of the business, and we have to manage these expenses in a prudent way. And here's how we arrived at this formula to do that. And just recently, I've been getting feedback from our leaders as we've shared that message across the country, and time again, they said that our message and our video and our the time that we took to explain it and the balance between what the company can bear, what our staff members will bear, was really resonating with individuals. So just beginning, and that's just the beginning of kind of planting the seed is you need to think of yourself. We all do. That's just human nature. But now you get this opportunity to be part of something bigger than yourself and think about the whole. And I think this is really exciting to be able to think about all the different things that we can continue to bring our staff members into and build that feeling that Jean mentioned of you're part of something bigger. And as we're all successful and you all do the right thing, we will all benefit from that, which is really, really gratifying.
This is a little for both of you. Did it matter to room and board to stay in Minnesota? Was there any talk of ever moving out of Minnesota as your headquarters?
I never, no.
And everyone I know in Minnesota knows room and board. Even if they've never shopped there, right? It might be a place we look and go, someday, I'm going to be able to get that beautiful piece that I'll never have to get rid of. What do you think it means to Minnesota to keep a company like Room and Board in Minnesota? The importance of becoming employee owned and what it means for not only Minnesota workers, but the other workers you have in other states.
I think I've thought a little bit about this question, right? Because it's a tough one, right? I mean, I hope that what it would mean to people to look at us and being employee owned, my hope would be that people think about doing ESOP for the right reason, because I think there's great benefit in it if done for the right reasons, right? There's lots of things out there about, it's a tax savings, right? All these things, which is nothing that we really ever discussed in detail. I think it's really about thinking about the future of a company and knowing that that company can carry on. And I think that's important to all of Minnesota, right? You want companies to begin, be successful, and continue on. So I think that's the broader basis. You just want to continue to have success in businesses and continue to give back, right? But I think, obviously we have about 300 staff members just in Minnesota. And obviously we have 1,100 across the country, but the ability to help them have hopefully financial success in their future, that's just one small part of what we can do for the strength of the states and the states that we actually operate in, right? Is allowing financial success for those staff members. But again, I think the bigger picture is how do you keep businesses strong and successful and that continue to do that into the future?
Any other thoughts?
Not really. Again, it's just the point that it's very not only gratifying, but I think it's important to continue to make sure that at least in our situation, that our staff members can benefit from the efforts that they put forth every day, and it's important to us to make sure that is shared in a way that improves people's lives.
And I think a lot of people don't know it. So as a single mom who raised 5 kids, I could never put into a 401k. I always had to spend that money somewhere else. In an employee stock ownership plan, ESOP, what do they put in? What money do they put in for this qualified retirement plan?
They do not put in money. This is all derived by the shares that they're allocated and hopefully the growth of the share price. Unlike a 401k plan where obviously they need to make their own contributions, which in our plan, we match those to a degree. But the beauty of NESOP is It's all money that we generated to our success, our shared success.
And they're coming to work, right? So I'm going to go to work. I'm going to come to work at Room and Board, and me coming to work is helping my retirement plan for my future. And I think we can all admit we're probably not going to build too much wealth with what we make, right, from our salaries or our hourly wage. Having that retirement plan changes and is transformative to someone who is creating the furniture, to building it, to being on a line, to the person in the C-suite. I think it's really one of the only forms of ownership that does that. Any last thoughts?
Oh, I guess, we talked a lot about the financial benefits of the ESOP, and they're not to be dismissed by any means. They're really important, especially long term, to our staff members who will endure with us in the future. I think I go back to what we talked about when we started the conversation about our culture. And this decision was really driven by the fact that we wanted to preserve our culture, certainly for the benefit of our customers who enjoy shopping with us, and certainly our vendors who rely on us for their economic prosperity to a large degree. But ESOP benefits aside, our staff members, I think, although not as measurable, benefit greatly from their time at Room Board because we have created an environment where they come in, they do good work, they thrive, they can be authentically who they are, and they're acknowledged for that. And we've always said in my team that our job is to make people better and to improve people's lives. And with or without an ESOP, our culture does that. So I think that's what we ultimately hang our hat on is that we've created a culture collectively that helps people live a full and holistically well life, personally and professionally. And again, the ESOP it's just the icing on a cake. It's good then to see that not only do they benefit from that culture, but then they can benefit financially long term as well.
It sounds like I might have found my retirement job. I might be
Maybe.
knocking
Let
on your
us
door to
know.
come to Room and Board and be on that floor. Thank you both for coming.
Thank you.
And we're just so excited to have you be part of the employee ownership family.
Thank you. We are as well.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Worker Co podcast. This podcast is a project of the Minnesota Center for Employee Ownership. If this podcast stirred hope and curiosity in you, and you are interested in learning more about employee ownership, please reach out. MNCEO is here to provide connections and resources to guide you as you consider employee ownership. Our website is www.mnceo.org. Thanks again for being part of this conversation with the Worker Co podcast. Hope to see you again.